good evening to everybody in London and also all the people that are joining in from different places around the UK and around the world. We have a fabulous panel today talking about how do you drive on through, how do you survive, how do you thrive, and how do you keep your business moving forward, and how do you progress to the other side. On this panel, we have some amazing speakers who are very versed with looking at this topic from many different angles. I myself am an entrepreneur. I know how hard, historically, having a business for many, many years, there have been curveballs, there have been trials, there have been challenges. But this is a challenge I think like none of us have ever faced in business, a crisis like never before. And it is having its huge impact on people, businesses. And so we thought it was really important to bring together some amazing people with some great experience to help us look about how you can move forward through here and how you can progress, and some of the things that you can access to offer relief, whether that's from a leadership position, from a mindset position, from a technical position, from a financial position. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce our fabulous speakers this morning. Sarah Matthew, I'll let her say a little bit about herself, because for those of you who know me, I'm so terrible at introductions, it's like a personal phobia. But then I'll add more detail because she would have gone first. So I'm going to let the fabulous Sarah, investor, leader, extraordinaire, to tell us a little bit about herself.
Oh, thank you, Tam. So I am Sarah Matthew. I'm founder of the Vibrant Company. The Vibrant Company is 2 years old. I'm a bit of a serial entrepreneur like Tam. So it's my latest venture, and I have a background in marketing and communications, but in the science field. And so as much as I'm interested in the communication of science, I became really interested in the science of communication. And beyond that, in terms of how whole businesses, whole infrastructures work and how we communicate within ourselves. So vibrant is what we are when we are in flow, when things are easy, when we know what to do. And I work with leaders and their teams to help them get to that state when they're suffering from friction and stuckness and completely overtaken by a problem, and we get back out and we make them as individuals vibrant again, and we make their organizations vibrant.
I think such perfect insights and learnings for now. I think one of the things I definitely know as a leader is I have many times through this process not felt vibrant, not felt clear, and actually not understanding how to move and take my team with me. So thank you, Sarah. We're also joined by the equally fabulous Debbie Serota, who is a commercial law partner at Irwin Mitchell. She's a mother, she's a champion. Every time I talk to her, I'm like, wow, when she says, this is what I've been doing recently. I think there was a lot of hope in what you shared that you'd been doing recently around some of the investments, some of the interesting things that were coming out of this, and a changing of the landscape, but also some of the things that we can access from whether that's a government support or through protecting ourselves legally. So Debbie, I'd love to hear a little bit more about you.
Thank you for that very kind introduction. Firstly, I'd just like to apologise to anyone that hears barking in the background. It's suddenly got a little bit noisy here, which I'm sure a lot of you can relate to, but it seems that every single dog in the neighbourhood is barking, including my own. Like Tam says, I'm a partner, specialise in corporate work, so investment and M&A at Irwin Mitchell in the city. Very interesting times at the moment, as I'm sure you can all imagine. We are doing a lot of investment work against the backdrop of COVID, which I think we'll get to a little bit later, and be able to answer any questions that you've got about running your business. But we're very much focused on helping our clients grow and actually protecting our clients' businesses at the moment. So it's extremely interesting. Hopefully not something we'll ever have to live through again, but exciting times while we're doing it.
And finally, thank you. And I also think as you say, there is some excitement and there is some innovation to come out of this. And finally, the fabulous man, the fabulous Matt that has joined this call, hiding in his loft because his son is somewhere lurking. His 7-year-old son is somewhere lurking, waiting to pounce like Debbie's dog. Head of corporate banking at HSBC. I think fighting the good fight. I think as you said to us yesterday, I mean, you've had the huge numbers of unprecedented requests for finance across a number of different size businesses, and actually keeping up with that to help and support and enable those possibilities through finance. Welcome, Matt. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you. What a fabulous introduction. So mostly untrue as well. So I work for HSBC. I run the corporate business in London. I've worked for HSBC for 21 years now. Spent most of my career in the kind of financing area. So doing leverage finance, so companies backed by private equity, and then the corporate finance kind of area. And then the last 2.5 years, I've run the London coverage network for the mid-market part of our bank. So what does that mean? That we look after 2,000 clients across London. The kind of size range is 10 million of turnover at the bottom to 350 million at the larger end. So kind of quite a broad area of the mid-market, and that's all types of sectors. So a very, very big spread of sectors. A lot of services businesses in London, as you'd expect. A lot of hospitality, leisure, retail, which is interesting right now. And the majority of our clients that we back are entrepreneurs. So most of the companies are privately owned. We have a few listed companies, but mainly privately owned. And we back the entrepreneurs that run these companies. So we've got a really interesting insight into the world right now, and unprecedented, as you've already said. You've touched upon it. I live in southwest London with my wife and 7-year-old son, and he comes up quite a lot. So I'm hoping he's not going to come up right now, but he has asked to watch. But he's downstairs, hopefully not. So interesting times juggling home and work life and homeschooling for those that are doing that as well. So interesting times.
Thank you. I think that, my dad was an entrepreneur, and he has always said that if it were easy, everybody would be doing it. And entrepreneurialism is not easy. It is complex. It's often lonely. It's hugely rewarding. I asked Sarah yesterday, were you made an entrepreneur, born an entrepreneur? And she said, I always knew from a child. And I actually think I felt very much the same. Although people start businesses at any time from now, from 7 to they're 65. But this is, we are in unprecedented times when those challenges are harder than ever before, and there are opportunities to be made. One of the interesting things that Matt said just now before we came on the line was, they're talking about one of the innovations that's going to come out of this period is actually noise cancelling technology that cuts out Debbie's dog, my child jumping around in the background. So there will be some innovations that come from now. One of the things we are seeing, and it is very, very sad for the landscape of British business, global business, we are losing companies because the bailouts that are available, particularly, in the travel industry, like Flybe, great British travel brand, there's just not enough, even with the government bailout, to help get them through. And we do not know when that model will return. There are also some wonderful stories of people innovating and pivoting their business, and I think that's what we think is also really important, and the learnings that we can get from Sarah. There are, everyone is saying this is a crisis like never before. We are seeing a recession and a depression. However, there is hope. We're doing some work in Asia. There is a spike and a recovery in Asia. Although they're kind of coming out the other side of COVID, we're definitely seeing businesses start to say, let's get back to it. And some of those businesses, they do expect a kind of quite dramatic uplift. Everybody is talking about thinking for 2021 and thinking, right now we've been in react to what's going on, we need to respond, and then we need to move and start thinking about that now. How do I recover? What do I need to do to my business, my team? How do I'm structured? How I'm financed to get through to work towards that recovery period and what will be the other side, the new normal. And as I said, there are some wonderful innovations. There was a lady called Kate from the Gin Kitchen who petitioned HM Revenue and Customs to switch her business to make hand hand sanitizer. Actually, I was sitting here, my godmother, actually, sadly I haven't got it, otherwise I'd share it with you. My godmother is a dressmaker and a costume designer in the film industry in the US, and one of the things she just sent to me, and she's been making them, is using all of the different amazing fabrics that she has, using filtration from within air conditioning units, and making them first for the front line in America, and then for her loved ones. And actually it's something that she's taken great passion in kind of giving people not only protection, but actually, and it's given her back a purpose, because for several months she was like, what am I doing? I've got nothing to, I just need to stay home and not give back and not innovate. And one of the things that I also think that I really know is so important as well is, you know, there were, if we look back to 2007 and the global market crash, some of the biggest innovations that are relevant in our time, from Twitter to Airbnb, were born out of that. And so that's something, you know, again, there are some things that we can learn from that. The WealthiHer Network, to tell you a little bit more, for those of you who don't know, was founded last International Women's Day we launched. And what we wanted to do, and it's been a very powerful, mighty mission, what we wanted to do is to say, how do we harness the knowledge and expertise of the amazing people who are within our partner organizations? We've partnered with leading, you know, financial organizations, from HSBC to Owen Mitchell to JP Morgan. And what we want to do is to say, you have the knowledge, you have the expertise. How do we use that to better understand and better enable and better equip women, whether they are entrepreneurs, business owners, leaders, investors? That is our mission. So today is a perfect example of that. And also, one of the things that was really, really interesting is that when we did our research, and we do a big piece of research looking at the needs of women, actually, proactively, 63% of the people approached us were women who were entrepreneurs, who said, me, I've exited, I want to give back like Sarah does as an angel investor, or, you know, help me, I'm a woman on the journey, let me have inspiration or advice. So this is exactly what we're all about. And this year particularly, we have an absolute focus on how do we help British entrepreneurs in its first instance, how do we help entrepreneurs globally more broadly, how do we help them rise up and get through this? So I'm going to stop talking and put myself on mute. So there are, first question is, the financial health of a business could be shaken so many different reasons, so many different challenges. Sarah, can you share some of the things that you've been either advising leaders, thinking of yourself as an investor, that you've seen go on through lockdown, and some of those challenges that you've seen business owners facing that you think would be useful for us to discuss?
Okay, so I won't necessarily speak to the finance piece specifically, because I think Debbie and Matt are better qualified to come on and talk to that piece. But I will speak to the overall business performance. And I think what we saw, for very obvious reasons, is lots of businesses go into shock and quickly try and regroup on, well, where are we and what does this mean for us? And initially, we saw a range. In terms of the business I've been helping, there were some businesses where it was obvious that continuation was going to be possible. And yes, things needed to change and flex, because if nothing else, everybody was working from home. But that actually the name of the game was to adapt as quickly as possible to be able to have some semblance of normality, and make sure that any disruptions to the supply chain, any disruptions in terms of how you deliver your product or service to your customers that still wanted your product or service, was overcome, minimized, and you got on with it. So that was sort of one set. Then there was another set of businesses for whom everything just went out the window. You know, overnight they saw their business continuity totally disintegrate, and so worked with businesses who've had to furlough most of their staff. And I think the initial mentality was, right, we need to wait until things go back to normal. But with the continuation of lockdown that we saw, which was inevitable, I think people had begun to adjust. And for me, it's one of the best definitions of resilience is the speed with which you adjust to the reality that you have, as opposed to the reality that you wanted. And I think the continuation, the extension of lockdown, allowed us to ask questions like, well, what happens if we never go back to normal? What would you do then? And out of that, as scary as that question sounded, it was actually quite a creative release. And we started to see businesses really think about, well, what if it never went back to normal? Then what would we do? And there was a letting go of what had been before, and I've seen some real creativity, fantastic ideas come out of that. And now we've got businesses thinking about, well, how do we go back to some semblance of normal? There is not going to be a going back to as was before. And a lot of what I'm doing at the moment, the friction, if you like, is around, well, how do we do that? When we're dealing with people, you know, we tend to forget that without people, organizations are nothing. They don't exist. And so we've got people who've been bereaved because of COVID. We've got people who've found it very difficult to readjust to their personal circumstances and their professional circumstances. We've got people who've actually they've discovered that they love working from home in lockdown. They love it and they never want to go back to the office again. And so as an employer, what do you do if you've got some people who are desperate to come back and some people never want to set foot through the office door ever again? How are we going to maintain or create and maintain cohesion across our people in those situations? And we've got people who are still going to have caring responsibilities for quite some time and are trying to juggle work, and we've got to try and make it so that we allow them to contribute their best and feel great about that, and not feel overwhelmed by all of if you take a holistic view of their responsibilities. So, you know, I always say, look, there's three things that determine people's engagement, their motivation, and their contribution at work. And one is the experience, like literally the moment-to-moment experience, and that's changed beyond all recognition. So getting some understanding of that and looking to see how that can be understood and harnessed going forward is really important. The second thing is purpose, and you mentioned this, Tam. And you know, some businesses have become, I suppose, opportunistic philanthropists through this, like the business that you mentioned. And what we found is that their people love it. Like there's more meaning almost to the philanthropic dimension that has, you know, they say, don't they, that necessity is the mother of invention. And it's amazing how innovative and inventive some businesses have been, but their people love that. So how do we continue to do that? Where are the opportunities there? That's really, really important. So purpose, my purpose, your purpose as a business, our purpose together is probably more important now than it has ever been in recent living memory. And then the third dimension is the overall context, which I've talked about a little bit, which is, if I think about my whole life, how easy is it for me to do my job? You know, and where does it fit, and how understanding is my employer of that whole context? So that will give you hopefully a flavour, some of the conversations that are going on across lots of different types and sizes of companies with leaders, because actually there are surprisingly few issues. They're very similar, no matter what.
Thank you. And hopefully I did disappear in the middle of that because my Wi-Fi went just to give us, my whole self disappeared. But I'm so glad when I came back on, I was like, phew, nothing, I haven't missed anything. But Sarah, thank you so much. I think so many things resonated with me. Again, I think your whole self, whether you're a leader, you know, you're like Matt, or you're an entrepreneur at home with your children, I think nothing has prepared you for that. You know, especially being able to sort of drive through the other side has always been in your power. And now you're like, I need to drive through the other side via homeschooling 101, math tutoring, then I need to get to my P&L. And I think that is a very, you know, is an interesting time, but also thinking about purpose. I think I've definitely emerged, you know, so pleased to be doing WealthiHer that has something where I believe we're doing good as well as we're creating, you know, prosperity. So I think, you know, to purpose and thinking about how you, for those accidental philanthropists, how they kind of bed that into their businesses going forward, because their people want to do it and they've got some real joy and you know, heart for themselves in doing that. And it is hard out there. So those things keep us alive and vibrant and pushing through. Matt, you've been on the front line. You have been there for your business owners. You've been there from a finance perspective. As you've said, you've had an unprecedented rise all at the same time, of businesses approaching you, long-term businesses, and saying, what can we do? How do we move forward? What are some of the things that you've seen, some of the things that you've talked to that are affecting your clients through lockdown and beyond?
Sure, and there are some similarities or parallels with what Sarah was talking about, and I think if I look back over the past 3 months, there's been a number of phases. So initially, there was shock, and there was companies were in crisis mode. I mean, I remember getting my first text on a Saturday morning saying, from a company in hospitality, and they were saying they were going to have to lay off all of their staff on the Monday or Tuesday, because this was before the furloughing scheme, and there was a real sense of shock. And what does it mean? And effectively, all companies were doing was trying to pull every lever they had, whether it's with their landlords, whether it's the supply chain, with their banks, with HMRC, to understand what how long they can survive, what the liquidity options are or were. Then we went into a phase when companies basically wrote new business plans. They wrote COVID-19 business plans to see them through the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months. And with lots of sensitivities around that plan. So, when will their business reopen for those that have been shut? What will that reopening look like? And then the government schemes came out, because there was obviously a delay for the government loan schemes, and they wanted to understand that. The banks had to learn how to operate those schemes. So, we had a number of weeks when all of the conversations was about which schemes were available to who, and I can talk about that in more detail as we go through. And so we had a lot of weeks whereby companies were applying and being approved for the various loan schemes, those that wanted to take on additional debt. We're probably, I would say, 75 to 80% through that now. So the majority of companies that had near-term liquidity issues and wanted to take on more debt have had something approved. There's a few that we're still working through, but the majority are through. So the real volume is gone. And we're now in a period of relative calm for a lot of businesses, that they've got some facilities. There could be different solutions. They've got a solution in place. They now have enough liquidity to see them through 6, 12, 18 months, but yet no one knows what post-lockdown looks like. So we're in this calm, but everyone's wondering, preparing for what it looks like, preparing for when staff come off the furlough scheme, preparing for how they prepare their business for a COVID-19 environment, but no idea whether revenues are going to return to 20, 30, 50 or 80% of the pre-COVID-19 levels. And that is the big challenge. No one knows what that, we can get some hints from other countries that are coming out of lockdown ahead of us, but it will be very dependent on the sector they're in and the kind of the phase of lockdown we're in as well. So relative calm now. Everyone is looking forward to getting back open for those that have been shut, and seeing what that looks like, and making sure, because there will clearly be liquidity issues, as often the bigger liquidity issues might be when they reopen, and actually you've got to reopen supply chains and get working capital moving again. So we're constantly talking to companies about what that might look like, and ensuring they've got enough working capital to support that reopening phase. So an interesting time, unprecedented, as you already said, but that's kind of been the flow of the kind of volume over the last 3 or 4 months.
Thank you. Do you think there's any, you as you say, and one thing I love about people from HSBC is that you've often been in your job for a long time. It must be a good company, because every person we have the pleasure to work with has been there a long time, and you've been with HSBC through the journey, through many crises, and you've obviously seen businesses go through different crises. And I always say, who can we learn from the past? Yes, nothing is like we've seen right now, but from those past crises or things, are there any learnings or that you can share that we can impart to our listeners to think about how they can take those learnings and adapt them beyond, what you've already said?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing to say is I don't think this crisis or situation is anything like any other we've faced. So, I can't think of another recession or crisis that has impacted everyone in almost, the same way. Clearly, some business models are better equipped to deal with a situation where, the population is in lockdown. But, it's very macro, isn't it? So everyone is impacted by this, personally and in the businesses. But I think there will be similar themes will come out of this crisis. So, the reality is the best businesses will survive. That is the positive. The really good businesses with really good products and really good propositions will survive. And coming out the other side of any crisis, there will be opportunities, because, let's be frank, some businesses may not survive, and there may be opportunities either with M&A or to take market share for the strongest businesses. So that will always emerge from any crisis. I think we'll see businesses coming out of this period leaner, and more flexible, because they'll have had to become more flexible with their cost structures and the way they work, particularly. And these companies will have embraced digital in a way that they will have never done before. So if I just look at HSBC, we were actually implementing Zoom before COVID-19, but I think we would have taken months and months and months to adopt it, and there would have been people who would have resisted it. But literally overnight, we all had to move to Zoom, and it's become so. The adoption's been so quick. So I think businesses will become much. The adoption of digital solutions will be very strong, and that will enable businesses to come out of this more agile, more flexible. I think Sarah's already mentioned it. I think the resilience, the best businesses will get through this, and it wasn't that long ago when we had the financial crisis. So I think we'll have resilient businesses with management teams that have experience of managing through downturns and post downturns, and they'll be able to manage cash and cash flows in a way that will create opportunities for those businesses coming out of this.
Thank you. And do you think someone's asked us a question, which I thought was a really interesting one, about to the panel or to Matt, where we think there will be bounce back, what categories? A couple of points from myself. I think, I've seen, the supermarket industry, the supermarkets in the UK, particularly, and all over the world. What they've seen is they are, they've got, someone like Tesco's hiring 15,000 people at the moment to handle the demand of online deliveries, although that has impacted some of their store, the way that they didn't, have the in supermarket. There's been some really interesting learnings from Asia, where actually, Alibaba and their home grocery actually borrowed people from the hospitality industry to meet that demand. So I think there's been some really interesting innovations. I also think that, there are other categories. Deliveroo, Amazon is doing very well. Any other thoughts from the panel about what sectors we think are going to bounce back, and whether you've seen any examples of those?
We're seeing a lot in cyber security at the moment. So one of the unfortunate things about everyone moving digitally and moving online is that the criminals have moved online as well. So we're seeing quite a lot of cyber criminal activity. So we've had some companies that are actually in the process of getting investment at the moment that are trying to combat that. And I think that's going to be a very big growth area over the next couple of years, because everyone, I think, like both Matt and Sarah said, the landscape of what our office looks like is going to change, and a lot of people for the foreseeable future are going to continue working from home, whether they ever go back. Whether they ever go back to the office full time, your guess is as good as mine. So with all of that, especially when it's finance, banking, law, everything really needs to be kept confidential. So we're really looking at the moment at various firewalls, security, that type of thing. So I think that's going to be a very big growth area for probably 21, 22, as well as all the others that you mentioned.
Noise cancelling.
Yeah.
Technology to optimize our Zoom.
Dog cancelling, noise.
I would just add, I think, that there's clearly short-term demand boosts. So, we manage companies that manufacture board games. There's been a resurgence in board games because everyone's at home. Whether or not that is a long-term trend or not, I don't know. But there'll be some of these trends will become long-term. It'll be interesting to see how people's fitness habits change. Now everyone's working out at home. They've all bought home gym equipment, which is one of the biggest categories of growth. Will that become a longer-term trend as people are not going back to gym so quickly? It's interesting. You mentioned supermarkets. Clearly, supermarkets have benefited in many ways because everyone's spending longer at home. But actually, another trend that's coming out, we're seeing a lot with our businesses, is this connection with the local community that has never existed so strongly before, and actually the connection with your local butcher and your local your green grocer, etc. So actually, will we become more local again, as opposed to the big supermarket shop? That's the way we've had to operate for a while, but actually, it's not clear how these trends are going to phase out. I think supermarkets will be fine, but I think some local artisan shops will do quite well out of this as well because of the local community feel.
Yeah,
I certainly hope so on that local point. I think that, one thing we know from behavioural science, I think it's on average it takes 3 months to change a habit, or 6 times. So hopefully we've shopped at that local butcher, we've spoken, we've engaged, and they become part of our kind of going forward and supporting our local community. Sorry, Sarah, you're about to say something.
No, I was going to say, I do think that the local trend will continue. We've seen how the supply chain can be impacted. And I think generally as well in this time, there's a lot more awareness. I mean, even if it feels like the climate crisis has rather fallen down the agenda, we are still seeing lots of conversations and discussion about the impact that consumerism has had. We found out that we need less when we're in lockdown than we thought we did. So there's some areas that are booming, but there's some areas where we have massively reduced our spending and don't need to. But there are also, I think, surprising areas. So one of the companies that I was working with, they're a big production company, and they did lots of things like silent discos and supplied all the silent disco equipment for festivals and so forth. So their business disappeared overnight, and they furloughed staff. And I think they were one of the companies that thought, well, we'll wait till it's possible to have large gatherings again and be able to operate as a business. And they were one of the leadership teams that I said to, but what if it never goes back to normal? And it was amazing what then kicked in. And in fact, out of that, there was a kind of a re-emergence and a repositioning, because people in lockdown still want entertainment. So silent discos have moved into people's houses and have become virtual. There's actually the possibility for a revenue stream attached to that. And there's a whole new direction of business that, even in January would not have been possible to imagine. Everyone would have said you're bonkers. There's no business in that. So it will be very interesting to see what else has come up opportunistically, as Matt said.
I have to say, I'm a teaser. Everybody on the webinar, we're going to be doing live disco at the end, a surprise live disco to see you into your evening. No, I jest. Debbie, obviously we've seen there are some, there is some government support. There are things like the Future Fund. What are some of those things that, talk to us about those things? Talk to us about the ins and outs, the good, the bad, and what you think of those, and how businesses can access.
It really depends on the type of business you are and what you're looking for. So I think the furlough scheme is something that most people are quite familiar with. And the purpose of that really was to give everyone a little bit of a breather. I think, as Matt mentioned earlier, the second this happened, everyone went into shock phase. And your first thought is, how am I going to pay my rent? How am I going to pay my staff? And, especially when you're a smaller business, you really know your staff well. You probably care about them. They're part of your family, especially if you're an entrepreneur and you've built the business up. So I think the furloughing scheme has been absolutely brilliant, and it's really helped some businesses out and given them a little bit of wiggle room, a little bit of breathing time to consider what else is out there. For some of the smaller businesses, you can do things like a delay having to pay your VAT, actually the bigger companies as well, which has also been a godsend. So, again, buy yourself a bit of time. It will need to be paid at some point, but you can put it off for the future. A reduction in business rates, or not even having to pay your business rates for a year, which has also been a big help. Some of our clients are looking at the Future Fund, and I think I mentioned this to you earlier. I've got mixed feelings about whether or not it's actually appropriate for everyone. So the Future Fund, on the face of it, is absolutely fantastic. The company doesn't have to be in revenue yet, so it can be quite an early stage company. But there are some quite stringent requirements which don't work for everyone. So an application for the Future Fund has to be made by September, unless there's some change in government and procedure, which we haven't heard about yet. But in order to qualify for the fund, you have to have taken on investment over the last 3 years of at least £250,000, which a lot of smaller, newer companies might not have actually managed to do yet. But additionally, in order to qualify for the Future Fund, you have to have investors that are going to match the amount that the government's putting in. So, for example, if you're going for 5 million, in order to get you to the next stage, you already have to have lined up £5 million worth of investment. But the problem with that is, one of the things that the government's insisting on is when they make the loan to you, at some point, it's going to convert into equity. And they're doing that at a 20% discount, which is really, really significant. So any future investors that are coming in, or even your current investors, are going to get quite heavily diluted. The value of what they put into their company is going to be reduced quite significantly. So when our clients are actually looking into it, they are concerned that whilst it would give them a short-term boost over the next couple of years, at the point that the company wants to grow again and needs to take in additional capital, they're going to really struggle to do that. So what we're doing is saying to people, listen, get yourself ready for the Future Fund. you know, it may be something that you want to go ahead with, but if you can get X million pounds worth of investment, can you take that now from private investors and see where you go, you know, in the next 6 months or the next 12 months, or can you increase the amount of investment that you're getting from private investors? And amazingly, I mean, when all of this happened, all of our deals stopped. It was literally one day we're really busy, the next day lockdown happens and everything went completely quiet. We sat there thinking, you know, is this going to happen? Are there going to be any deals out there? But all of a sudden the investment picked up, and it's UK investment, but it's also foreign investment. People are looking at existing companies, innovative companies, and it's really exciting to know that there is this flow of funds out there. Some of our clients are investing purely, you know, from a charitable purpose. We've got companies that are investing in medical research companies, and they're not actually expecting to see anything out of it. But some people are taking this as, you know, in a couple of years I could quadruple what I'm putting in, and there are some great deals out there. So my advice would be look very carefully if you're considering something like the Future Fund, and see if you can do it privately first. Not knocking it, I think the government's done a really good job with what they've put together and what they've put together so quickly, and obviously, you know, they need to recoup some of what they've put in, but there are private investors, which I'm sure Sarah can tell you a bit more about, that are looking to help out, you know, UK businesses, but also to make some money off the back of it.
Some amazing advice, because I think that knowledge, we have to be armed going into it. I had looked at it and didn't understand the 20% discount, the match funding. So I think, again, you need to be armed. Is that right for you? And have your preparation in place. But there are other things available from the government. Matt, I know you've spoken about some of those. Can you share a little more on that?
Sure. So there's a number of government loan schemes, and they came out at different sort of points. So it was a difficult sort of roadmap to sort of navigate it a little bit, because the timing was, you know, separate. But we now have the bounce back loan called a B bill. We have the coronavirus business interruption loan, C bill, and we have the large version of that, which is a CLE bill. The bounce back is the smaller loan for up to 50,000. You can take a C bill up to 5 million, and that's for companies with turnover up to 45 million. And the larger companies of over 45 million turnover can do a CLE bill. There's also the CCFF program, which is more of a commercial paper program for larger investment grade companies. So now we have the full range. So for companies that you know, aren't looking for an equity solution, they're looking for a loan solution. There is something for most companies. The reality is the B bill, the small version, is the one that has attracted the most volume, both in terms of the number of applications, but also you know, the actual level of lending. So I think that last week's figures were million of lending under the guarantee by the government, and you can get access to money very quickly, but it's only up to 50,000. That my team has spent most of our time on C bills, which is the slightly larger scheme up to 5 million. And for many companies who are impacted by COVID-19, it's a really good solution. You need to have a viable business. So, you know, not one that's pre-profit, for example, but as long as you can demonstrate that you're profitable and can afford repayments of a loan. The tenor is up to 6 years, so there's some flexibility. It's actually a really good product. I mean, the reality is they're all, for loan products, they are, I mean, I've worked in the loan market for most of my career. They're as good as anything you'll ever see, because ultimately there's other than in the C bills and B bills, there's no interest or repayments in year one. So there's no cost to the borrower in year one. There, you do pay the interest in a CLE bill. But crucially, there's no prepayment fees. So if you wanted to take out the loan to see you through, and then you wanted to refinance it with a conventional product after year one or in year two, then you have that ability, and there's no prepayment fees. They're very flexible, you know, limited cost in year one, no upfront fees. So, you know, they serve a purpose, which is to provide liquidity to companies that you know, businesses have been impacted by COVID-19. So we've seen huge volumes. I say we've written more loans in the last 2 months than we would normally write, you know, in a year or more. So lots of people accessing the schemes, and I think they've been very helpful. Not for everyone, because if you're looking for an equity solution, then Future Fund or other equity partners is the right solution. But for a debt solution, those that have a viable business, they're good programs.
Can I add something to that very quickly? One thing we've seen with our clients that are going with the government-backed loans is they are very attractive, because they're not asking for personal guarantees up to a certain amount. And Matt, presumably you can explain a little bit more about the levels. I think for under 50,000 or 50,000 below, they're not asking for any form of personal guarantee or security over the business owner's home. And then over and above a certain level, the personal guarantee is limited to about 20% of the value of the loan, which, you know, for a business in, you know, this marketplace at the moment, I think is very, very attractive.
Yeah, it's 250. It's 250,000 is the limit. So there's no personal guarantees if the loan is 250 or less. If it's above 250, as you say, it's 20% of the amount outstanding. So yeah, so limited personal guarantees. That's not what it's about. It's about, you know, the corporate covenant of the company, and then obviously the banks get the benefit of the government guarantee. And there's a large number on CBILS. There's a large number of lenders. There's, I think, over 50 now that are accredited to lend under the CBILS program. So it's a pretty broad program.
Can I ask a quick question on the bounce back bill? What are the criteria, and how do businesses prepare for that to make that application?
So it's up to 50,000. There's the tenor, the term of the loan is 6 years. So it's 100% government guarantee. So the banks are providing the loans, but ultimately you benefit from the whole guarantee. And there's a fixed interest charge on that, so it's of 2.5% and no fees. There's around 20 accredited lenders currently, not as many as the CBILS yet, because it takes some time for some to get accredited. And it's a self-certified program. So ultimately, it's a digital application. The banks will all have their own kind of portal or application process, and you apply online, and you certify that you were a profitable business, that you've been impacted by COVID-19. It's for businesses that have been impacted by COVID-19. It's not for businesses that want to, you know, do capex or M&A or any other purpose. It's for businesses that their business model has been impacted, and it's self-certified. So it's quick. And I think that's the reason it's been so popular, is because people can get access to the money within a few days.
Okay, thank you. One of the questions that's quite practical that's come from the panel, from the audience, is are there any other practical tips around conversations with suppliers? So is there a way to engage with suppliers and say, and I would definitely say from my experience historically and now, is to say, yes, you know, we're going to agree to a payment plan, and this is what we're going to do. Can we do it this way? Be very honest and open with that. I've also heard, you know, suppliers relaxing on the other side. I mean, I'm, saying I'm actually going to let you do that because I understand, you know, you've got stock, this is challenging. And I think that collaborative conversation and real conversations between those we do business with is really, really critical. I don't know if anyone's got anything else to add to that. Otherwise, we'll move on.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely worth looking at your commercial contracts, because sometimes they've been drafted a lot wider than you would have actually realised, and there may be some kind of wiggle room in what you can negotiate with the other side. Also, I think something about COVID has been very humanising. We've spoken to our clients and our suppliers in a way that we probably wouldn't have before. You know, we've discussed our children, our families, people have seen the inside of our homes, and definitely building a better relationship with people. And I think there is genuinely that desire to try and help other people. And I've said to all of my clients, honesty is the best policy. So if you are struggling to pay someone, it's so much better to be honest with them, rather than saying to them, yeah, you're going to be paid in 7 days, but to be honest and say, listen, I'm waiting for this, but actually you can be paid in 28 days. That's going to save everyone from legal costs, from having to sue someone, or writing letters saying, why aren't I being paid? Everyone understands everything's up front, and you can use it as a tool to renegotiate some of your commercial contracts as well. And just remember as well that the people that you're dealing with now, you're going to have to deal with them post-COVID as well, when everything opens up. And if you're that supplier that's being very difficult and not being flexible at all when you can afford to do so, and I appreciate not all of the suppliers can, if you can afford to be a little bit flexible, you know, you're going to have customers for life following this. So I think it's really important to remember that this is relatively short term. At some point, the world's going to open its doors again, and all of these people that you've been dealing with now are the same people that you're going to be talking to, dealing with. So, you know, if you can try and build a rapport and a relationship and look at things together collaboratively, I definitely would.
Thank you, Sarah. You know, it's so hard blending our worlds, and I know how hard it is to blend my personal, my business, because they're all one now. How do you think, you know, and we've also talked about it with Matt, resilience, I think is a really important thing, whether that's about my whole self, my whole life, my business and my personal, but how can we learn, build resilience? And secondly, linked to that in whatever order is, I think you've spoken, and is your big area is, how do we shift mindsets for owners or entrepreneurs? And I know from myself, I think of myself as hardy. I've been through a lot, and actually, I have to get myself in the right mindset. My trick is Rise Up by Andra Day. Play it really loud, or listen to Rocky, The Eye of the Tiger, and get back to the fight.
I love that. Oh, I really love that. Yeah, so I'm going to say something at the outset which goes against what most people teach, which is that I think we are all resilient, but for our thinking that we're not. You know, resilience isn't something that's out there that we have to go and get. We have it, but very often it's obscured, it's obliterated by the noise that's going on in our heads. So I'm going to answer those two questions in a way that's linked. One of the most useful things to do when we think about resilience as the speed at which we can adapt to the reality we have is, well, I call it, in the Vibrant Company, we have, I'm going to loosely call it a methodology. I'm not going to call it a process, but something called Day One, which is if you imagined that you arrived in your life, in your business today, and you had a very quick briefing on this is what we do, this is what needs to happen, but you didn't have all the backstory and you didn't have all of the rules and the baggage, how would you approach it? Because very often what stops us being resilient is the attachment that we have to how we think things should be, because they used to be like that, or because other people have told us that that needs to work. So with this work-life balance thing, the first thing is throw out all of the rules about what should and shouldn't be. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? I was speaking to a team last week and they were using the word professional. And I said, well, what does professional mean? And they said, well, it means business dress and it means formal offices. And I was like, but why does it? Right. So very often what we're doing, we've inherited, we have unconsciously been conditioned into. So day one thinking is about, if you woke up this morning and you went, okay, draw a line, what's gone is gone, I'm moving forward, then start there, start now. It's not about building off what's gone on before, it's about creating in the reality that faces us today from this point. And to your very good point, Tam, you know, start off by plugging into things that energize you. Like, that's really important, to give yourself the opportunity and the space. And again, we've had rules around, no, I can only do that outside office hours or whatever. Well, do you know what? All bets are off. So whatever it is that makes you feel energized, do some of that, because we were talking about it yesterday, weren't we? There's a famous Einstein phrase, which is, you can't solve a problem from the level of thinking that created it. So you need a new level of thinking. And rather than, I'm sort of mindful of time, but rather than hog up all the time, there's a practical tip which I'll give you. I can't draw it, but I want you to visualize a compass. And for pivoting, you know, because pivoting is about going around, we talk about go up, go down, go out, go forward. So you can think of it as north, south, west and east, or east and west, whichever orientation you want. But go up is, okay, so my business was or is about this. What's the highest possible context for that? So as a really quick example, if we took the production company that did the silent discos, we chunked up and up and up to the highest possible context was, oh, okay, so our purpose is about giving people joy through music. Right, that's our highest possible context. That's where they arrived at. Okay, so now we've got a highest possible context. Right, go down. What are all of the components of our skills, our capabilities, our assets, if you like, the things that we know, the things that we have? Because maybe there's a different way to group them together, or maybe we pull one out that we never thought was the leader before, but actually we have a highest possible context, and we have a group of assets, even if they're pieces of knowledge down here. what does that tell us? And when we go out, I mean, go out to people, like talk to people. And I love the point that Debbie was making. Now more than ever is the time to be human about it. So talk to customers, talk to competitors, look at what they're doing, talk to your employees, but not with an agenda, because we've learned in the business world that time is money and we must have a very focused conversation. Now is the time to listen. Now is the time to have very broad conversations, to be saying to our customers, what's going on for you? What have you found that's like, what's the thing that you really wish you had but don't right now? Or what's the thing that's most irritated you? Like, where are the pain points? These are the opportunities. You talk the same questions to your employees, and then something in that, the up, the down, the out, allows you to say, so where are we now, and what can we do today? What's obvious now? So that's what's going forward. Is you don't have to know everything. You don't have to know where you're going to be in 3 months' time. You don't have to know where you're going to be in 3 weeks' time. You're just going to need to know what's the most productive thing you can do today. And that might only take you 10 minutes. And then there is time to do the homeschooling and the other bits and pieces. But that would be the shortest, most practical piece of advice that I can think to share.
I loved your day one thinking as well. I think, we do have to let go, of it is that way, it was that way, it will possibly never ever be that way, but there'll be new ways, and let go and think of it as day one. On that point, Debbie, I know you've talked previously about starting now, and that could be I'm pivoting and reimagining my business quite dramatically, or it could be I'm starting. Do you have any stories, thoughts, ideas on that you can share around starting, beginning anew, day one, as it really is, day one?
Yeah. So we've got some really interesting ones, actually. We've got some clients that are already in established businesses, and they're very much serial entrepreneurs. And the second this happened, they're coming up with ideas, brimming with ideas. And at the moment, they can fund themselves. I think one of the most important things that we've advised them is, we don't know how long this is going to last. We don't know what the landscape is going to look like. You need to protect your existing business, but you also need to protect your new business. And that's looking at company structure. So, for example, if your business, we've got one client and he supplies jewellery all around the world to, the big companies like TK Maxx, places like that. Obviously that business has gone very quiet at the moment, so he's moved into producing, or the company's moved into producing COVID packs, which they're selling to companies where unfortunately their staff do still need to travel into work. So it's giving your staff, a mask, some hand gel, whatever it is. And they moved into that very quickly. And I said to him, this may be a very short business plan. Don't let it affect your other business, which is quite cash rich. Make sure you've put it in a separate entity. But also, if you're looking to, if you're in a business with someone else and you're looking to set up something new, you've had an idea, just make sure that you can actually do it and you're not going to get yourself in some legal problems. So if you're a director of a company, you've got fiduciary duties to that company. And if you suddenly have this absolutely amazing idea, which potentially could be put into your current company, but you go off and do it by yourself, your business partners may be very unhappy with you. So again, I think this has been a theme throughout this: be open and honest with people. Say, I've had this idea, this is what I'm planning to do. Make sure, under your employment contract, your shareholders agreement, your articles of association, whatever it is, that legally you can actually do it, and you're not going to end up with, on the one hand, this amazingly successful business, and on the other hand, a lawsuit where you're going to have to transfer all of your profit back to your old business partners and potentially fall out with them in the meantime. So yeah, I think it's a great time to start a business, because there is money floating around out there and there's some great ideas. And I think, like Matt said earlier, a lot of businesses were born out of the 2007-2008 crash, and I think we'll see the same. But learn the lessons from people that went through it before. Just make sure that whatever you're doing, you protect yourself from day one. You don't just jump into it, which I know a lot of entrepreneurs like to do. They go straight for it, and it's left to probably the very boring lawyers like myself to think about the practicalities of it. But there's plenty of lawyers out there that will give you an hour free chat. Take advantage of it, give them a call, and float your idea by them.
I think that's such a good advice. I definitely know from myself, as entrepreneurs, you go, yay, let's do it. And even you might have investors who are the same as you. And actually, I found myself, very sadly, in a very tricky position when my chairman was in hospital. And actually, I was thinking, some of this we haven't even documented anywhere. And actually that kind of getting everything prepped is so critical. And I also have seen, which is sad, you know, we're seeing the best of people and the worst of people. And I have seen some very sharkish, contractual, vicious activities going on that have required legal protection. So I think best for, you know, prosperous, exciting futures, but also protection to sort of make sure we're kind of, you know, really armed on that. Matt, you have done this many times of helping business start with HSBC and debt and advice. What learnings can you share?
Sure. I mean, I think starting up, there's, you know, getting the capital structure right from the outset is really important. So, you know, there's, you know, getting the right equity base, whether that's from, you know, the shareholders or bringing in support, you know, other investors right from the start is absolutely crucial, because what you don't want to be doing too early in many cases is putting too much debt into the business, and so that you create a burden for the business. You know, there are working capital schemes that are very suitable for many businesses in growth phase, whether that's, you know, if they're selling to businesses, invoice finance type schemes or trade schemes to help with, you know, working capital support, and that can be really effective. And there's, you know, in some sectors, you know, there's grants that can be used as well. So there's R&D, etc. So there's lots of sources of capital, but doing that thoughtfully and in the right way, so that you don't you have the right capital structure to allow growth, I think is really important. I think Debbie's already touched on it, you know, in terms of, you know, I think as important as financial support and the capital, you know, is the non-financial support. So, you know, get the right board in place, have, you know, the right non-execs supporting you, you know, mentors. There's lots of people out there that are willing to give up their time to help businesses, you know, start up and grow, and use all of that, you know, use all of your network to make sure you get that advice and that support at the board level, because that will be as important as making sure you've got the right capital structure in place. And obviously a good bank, you need a good bank as well.
You absolutely do. My dad always says you need a good banking partner. They will be your partner for life. Tell me, group, because we're running out of time. Matt, I think, you know, great advice around have someone that's a mentor that pushes you, that advises you. Sarah, Debbie, you know, what would be a top tip that you'd share with, you know, for entrepreneurs so that they can, you know, take from this? Top 1 or 2 tips.
Okay, it's very similar to Matt's actually. I'm a big believer in takes a village, and find yourself a group of entrepreneurs. There's plenty out there on the internet, whether it's group chats, online, whatever it is. They will have been through, probably not COVID, but they will have been through any issues you've got in relation to starting a business, running a business, and they'll be there to give you the benefit of their wisdom. I'm an absolutely huge believer. I mean, even something like what you're doing with WealthiHer, where you've got a group of people that have been through it before and are sharing their knowledge. You know, I think something like that's absolutely invaluable. So I would always advise, don't go it alone. Don't sit in your room by yourself panicking because one of your investors has done something. You know, go and speak to the people in your network and find out, what did someone else do when this happened to them? How did they get through it?
I think that's such a good point, because it is lonely, and I've heard lots of my entrepreneurial connections say the same. It's lonely. You're trying to shield your people. You're not trying to lead them, lift them up, protect them. You can only do A or B, you know. So I think sharing that load with other entrepreneurs. Sorry, Sarah.
Yeah, I would definitely say community as well. I think it's vital. And the other thing is that entrepreneurs tend to have a good connection to their intuition, and I think you do need to give yourself some time to sit with however it is that you get in touch with your natural intuition. And what I would say, what we know from a neuroscience point of view, is that when we're in fear, what happens is our minds go to our left brain, and in our left brain is our rational minds, but also our memory, so our data bank. So talking about that new level of thinking that we need, that next level of creativity, is never going to come from our left brain, because the left brain only goes to what it knows from before. And if we want new thinking, we've got to get into our right brain, which is where our inspiration and our intuition is. So, you know, it's why you can be in the middle of a creative brainstorm and have no ideas whatsoever, and then you get up to go to the loo, and it's while you're not thinking about anything that idea comes. So whatever your version of getting yourself out of your minds for a little bit is how you will connect to that intuition and then trust it. That's what I would say. So community and that deeper knowing within yourself, that do whatever it takes to reconnect with it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, we are almost out of time. I think we've answered most questions. I think there's one we missed. Apologies. If you do have any more questions, please reach out to myself, Tamara, at thewellthyhernetwork.com, and we will field those to our wonderful panelists. Thank you so much, Sarah, Debbie, Matt. Thank you for sharing so candidly. And so, entrepreneurs, good luck out there. Talk to people, ask for help. There is help, whether that's financial, legal. You know, don't go it alone. Go for a run listening to Eye of the Tiger and find your energy, and stay safe, stay well. Thank you very much. And thank you to our wonderful partners with Essentially for making this happen.